Hey everyone, today I'll be reviewing my newest MOC Demolisher. This MOC took me about 6 hours to build, and I'd like to say he's upwards of 400 pieces. I went ahead and took his gun out of his hand, and I'll show that to you closer up later on. Before we get into the detailed review, I'll go ahead and start off with a size comparison. Here's Executioner. He's one of my most recent MOCs. As you can see, he's just a little bit shorter. And here's Surge 2.0, which he's almost twice as tall as Surge. I hope that helps you get a frame of reference of how tall this MOC is. For the detailed review, I'll go ahead and start with the legs, since they're probably the least interesting part on this MOC. I gave this MOC the appearance of having a 3-jointed leg, but he doesn't actually have them because there's no joint right here. There's just a joint at the top of the thigh and then one right here at the top of the lower leg, and obviously a ball joint for the feet. But I don't know exactly why I left out the joint right here. I just don't typically like making 3-jointed legs in the typical sense, because then you have a lot of different joints to articulate the leg, and I can never really get a good pose. So I just decided to make a fixed L shape right there, and just to leave out that other joint. And I actually like how it turned out. Now, you might have already noticed that these legs are very bulky, kind of a little too bulky, potentially like right here at the thigh, but that's also kind of to go with this MOC's aesthetic. I just wanted him to look very mechanical and very bulky, and so I really like the design that I went with. I used probably too many studs for some people's taste. I don't love putting Lego pieces on my builds, but I just put them on the exposed Technic holes just to kind of fill in the gaps and to add a little extra detail. The legs don't really have a super complicated structure. It really is just that L shape right there. That's constructed with, I believe, 4 long lift arms. I think that's just all that's under there, just a bunch of them forming that shape. And then I use some CCBS armor plates on either side just to kind of round off the shape. And then I use Stormer 5.0's headpiece as knee armor. And then his feet are custom. Unfortunately, I did not have 4 of these Bionicle spikes. Otherwise, there would be 2 on each foot, just because that looks really cool. But unfortunately, I only had 1 apiece for each foot. The foot design is built around a preset Bionicle foot piece, but I just turned it around and then added a long segment just protruding out of the back of the foot, and then I put a spike at the end. And besides that, there's not too much else to note about the legs. I really like the use of the Bionicle jet pieces just to give the thighs some extra armoring around back. Also, I took some notes from some comments that I had about how my legs were a little too short on my MOCs, and so I lengthened them accordingly to how long I believe they should be. The arms were actually the very last thing that I built on this MOC, and instead of rushing through them, I took my time and actually came up with a pretty useful hand design, which I actually really like. The only unfortunate thing about the hand design is that it does need a little rig piece to meet the hand with the gun. Otherwise, you cannot connect a weapon unless it's some type of knife that sticks down, or I don't know, maybe a different type of minigun where you could connect it from the bottom to the bottom of this hand, which that would work, but instead I'm using an upright minigun that I built, and so that's why you have to have this little rig piece. But besides that, I really like the hand design. That's the only drawback that I can see. I also happen to like the arm design a lot. Instead of using the typical arm design that I do, where I just have a ball joint right here on the elbow, and so it can only move forward and back with very, very little side-to-side motion. Most of the motion you see just comes from that ball joint up there. So instead of doing that, I actually gave the arm a ball joint right there, so it can move side to side in many different directions. And so that works a lot better, and that's probably what I'm going to start using for all of my arm designs. Around the back, I used that Bionicle jet piece once again to cover up the back of the arm. I like to use that design because it just works so well. That piece is very good for covering up the back of arms and legs. And I used those really cool Bionicle armor plate pieces that I got from Maxilos, I believe. Those are some of my favorite armor plates. You might have already noticed that the body is just perpetually hunching, and that's because it's built on an angle. So there's really no way to make him hunch any less. You can kind of stand him up, but still his body is perpetually hunching. And so that made it a little bit difficult, making all the different angles and making sure they're not illegal in any way, and making sure they're all structurally sound. One of my favorite designs has to be the two panels right here that are coming down at an angle. Those took a while to get right, but I think they look pretty good. Another detail I like are these vents. All of them look really cool. I really like those chrome vents. I like using them in MOCs especially. And his chest plate is really cool to me also. I don't remember what Bionicle said that comes from, but I need to get more because I believe I only have 2, and so they're a very useful piece, so I would like to invest in more. And his little neck area right here, it's nothing special. You can just see some techniques, and there's really no detailing whatsoever. In fact, I probably should have covered that area up better. I really like his shoulder plates also. I think those look really cool. And that's really all I have to say about the MOC, so now we can move on to his gun. Here is his upright minigun. This is really an interesting take on the classic minigun. I don't really build any minigun style weapons. Usually when I do, I build them where they're hanging down and they've got a handle coming up. So this is an interesting spin on the classic minigun. And I did not use one of those practically frictionless pins that is super easy to spin. Instead, I use one that's firm, so you can't really just make it spin super fast. And the reason for that is I'm planning to use this in a stop motion, and so I don't want it to be free spinning while I'm trying to get it into a fixed location. And so that's just why I used a pin with friction instead of basically a frictionless one. And this is a battery-powered minigun. It shoots lasers, not typical bullets, and the reason for that is because I didn't want to make it chain fed. I just wanted to make it laser so I could put a battery on it, and so it'd be really nice and self-contained. I like the temperature gauge also. I think that looks pretty cool. And this little tube is essentially the stock. I know it's a very short stock, but if you were to put something against your shoulder, I guess it would be just that part of the little tube right there. I used a lot of different Bionicle armor plate pieces, one here, here, and right there. And I guess this would kind of be a heat shield. Well, it couldn't really be. I would think it would have to extend a lot more to do anything. It's kind of worthless if it's supposed to be a heat shield. I really like the vent, though, and that's really cool also. This minigun took me probably about 10 minutes to design, and I'm planning to do a build video on it if you would be interested in seeing that. Currently, I'm doing an Assassin series, and these are the 3 MOCs that have come out of it, and I only have one other MOC to build. So if you like what you see, then please like and subscribe, and check out some of my other videos, and wait for the next Assassin to be reviewed next Friday.